Start then, I think. Okay, y'all been looking at this for a while. Zoom just saw the title slide here for the first time. And yeah, I think we're all kind of on the same page with what I'm presenting on. So I'm going to start off with uh, what is botany? Botany, a lot of times people think about plants, but not everything about plants is botany. So we're going to go into that. Real quick, I wanted to do this presentation because on the Audubon trips I've gone on, like she said, I would see a plant, I'd hop in, it'd be exciting for me. And then also some of the other participants would want to know, what is that plant? And once it got out that I kind of can identify plants decently here, that was a common question people would ask for me. It kind of led me to realize that botany and birding pair really well together. In one part because you are out in nature. Birding is something that you're not walking super fast. You're kind of in the space, occupying that space. But there's not always birds. And having a plant right there to enjoy, it's a really nice pairing. It kind of just makes sense while you're going out there. The pacing is kind of similar, and it just kind of makes the whole experience a bit richer. If you strike out in one, you might not with the other. The other piece of this is that plants are important for birds. So if we care about creating a habitat for birds in our yard and restoration areas, knowing some botany helps with that. And then also, there's a lot of really cool facts about how birds and plants get along. So as bird enjoyers, those interactions are of interest. So I'm going to kind of spend a lot of time going into botany and how to do botany because I feel like the pairing of the two out while birding is the place you're going to interact with it the most. But we'll end with a lot of those bird interactions, some of those facts. Okay, so it's a discipline, scientific discipline, and for me, a hobby. Those two things overlap, but there's some pretty distinct differences. Here is a pretty comprehensive-ish list of different avenues of botany, and there are subdivisions, and then there are, when you talk about a scientific discipline, it really can be a lot. You see here, things like mycology often get lumped underneath it, or lichenology. We also got, paleobotany, studying fossils of plants, all kinds of things. Hobby botany overlaps with very little of this. This is all pretty advanced stuff. But we can break that down into like 8 categories here, broadly speaking. Systematic botany, atomical botany, morphological botany, physiological botany, plant pathology, plant ecology, plant genetics, and plant cytology. Really quickly, systematic botany is about like how plants are related, taxonomy, genetics often intersects with that. When we talk about how to identify plants and keying them out, that's systematics. Anatomical stuff is like the structure of leaves, slicing things, looking at stuff under the microscope. Morphological botany, this also intersects a lot with hobbyists in that this is about the structure of a plant. How many leaves does it have? How are they arranged? What's the size or shape of the flower? Identification relies a lot on using morphological traits to assess the systematic relationships. So we can see by shape how something's related. Physiological is studying the structure. Plant pathology is like sickness, illness, the fungi, infections. Ecology is how things are related. Genetics, I think we all know that term. Cytology is the cells. So those are like the broad categories of the science. A few of them are kind of relevant to hobbies, which I've starred here. When I've been out in clubs, out in the field, kind of being a hobbyist, these professions here are the ones I often come across, where they are professional botanists, but they're also engaging in it as a hobby. They enjoy it. They're out there in clubs. So foresters, conservationists, etc. You'll meet a lot of professionals if you join some of those clubs. Yeah. So like I said, botany is not all plant stuff. Really, it's looking a lot at identifying different species of plants. It's a bit more scientific. It's not necessarily growing vegetables in your garden, though it can be growing things like native plants. Um, it's a bit fuzzy how you divide those two things, but just kind of think about them as different. Um, native plants, I want to just touch on this. Native is a broad term that's used pretty loosely. Uh, Generally speaking, when you like go to the nursery and you get a native plant, they really kind of mean North American native. Um, that doesn't mean that they're native to Spokane specifically. You don't go out in the wild and see them growing here. Um, we've got things like North American native, you've got West Coast native, you could have something that's locally native. Each of these different kind of contexts matters for pollinator spread and how well adapted it is to your environment, and also what kind of gene pool is going to be out there for it to contribute to or lack thereof. So I tend to think of native plants. I gravitate towards those that are locally native. I try to grow those that are locally native because North American native, you can still have something that's invasive from the East Coast. It's aggressive and it pushes out our local natives. So yeah. There's a lot of ways to be a hobby botanist. I've just covered a few here. So some people focus on the habit or category. For example, when I say habit, that's how plants grow. Some people really like trees, and so their hobby botany focuses on learning all of our local trees. Some people, like myself, like what we call forbs. Forbs are small, herbaceous, flowering plants, sometimes woody plants, little guys. Uh, I have focused on forbs with most of my time. If you ask me what a bush is or a tree is, I probably can't tell you. And some trees are tricky. Some trees are pretty tricky. So engagement method is, what is the substance of your hobby? Some people are photographers. Some people are journalers. I've seen out botanizing someone bring a sketch and they go and some colored pencils and they go out and they sketch the plants they see. There's many mediums by which you can engage botany with. So if you have certain hobbies that you'd use with birding, those might overlap with botany. Generalists versus specialists here, some people focus on certain families or certain genuses or certain species of plants that they really gravitate to. So I'm part of the Eriogonum Society. Eriogonum is a genus of plants where that whole society, they just all celebrate, go and look at and find members of that genus. Generalists might be someone who just goes out and botanizes in their local woods. So I actually feel like I'm a little bit of both. I have some families of plants that I really gravitate to, and then I'm also just out about finding new things, just kind of learning as much as I can. Not at trees, we'll get there. So there's also propagators, so people that are learning how to grow and propagate and rehabilitate in some ways native plants of our area. Herbarium collections, plant pressers, so people who go out and they actually are collecting samples of plants, pressing them, and delivering them to institutions where they save those. There's a lot of online, like people that specialize in identification, identifying virtually. People who go outside, citizen scientists, a lot of avenues to engage with. So briefly, my journey into botany here. Early days, okay, this slide didn't get finished. So you can see here, I've got like some plants I collected and dried. I'm just kind of enjoying plants. I don't really know what I'm picking up. I'm looking at it a little bit. Like there's a rose here. There's some what's called lomatium here, biscuit root. At the time, I probably couldn't tell you which one of the species these are because both these can be tricky to tell species beyond genus. And I was just out and enjoying. I moved to Lincoln Park, or not to Lincoln Park, near Lincoln Park. And Lincoln Park is kind of a gem. It's up on the South Hill, and this is a map of it. And I've sketched on it kind of all these little micro climates that you find in the park, different areas of moisture or rocky or shallower soils. And each of these have different kinds of plant communities. And being next to this natural space that has so many plant species, I think right now I've got 276 species logged there, and that's excluding trees. Not all trees, but some. Um, so it's such a diverse park. It's such concentrated diversity, and that really spurred this journey for me because I'd see new things every day, every week, and that made me ask questions, maybe want to engage more. What is that? I'd be out in the middle of hot summer and see a beautiful lily, and I grew up in Spokane, and I don't remember seeing these things. When you start paying attention, it kind of spirals out of control. So, I will say, botany is linked to place very much. You can be someone who just travels and enjoys plants and looks for cool plants, but there's something really special about having a place that you really grow familiar with, that you see the season changes, that you get a sense of the pacing of the place. You see one thing bloom and then fade as then another thing rises, how the pollinators change, and then how that impacts the birds there. The story of a place is very temporal, and visiting a place time and time again, it adds a lot of value to your relationship to botany. Another tool that helped with my journey is iNaturalist. Raise your hand if you know what iNaturalist is, if you've heard of it. Okay, a lot of you, not everyone though. It's a website and an app, online database. And for me, this was a vehicle for me to, it's like a diary of my observations. And that really helped me. It became the medium in which I did botany. Like we talked earlier about, you can have different mediums. This was my medium. And it also is a platform that helps you learn more about the plants and what else is in your area. So it really spurred me on. These things in tandem. I also had a few spark plants, and we got our spark birds. These were genuses or types of plants in the area that I found really captivating, beautiful, and then found out have some diversity and also have some difficulty in identifying. And so those aspects of these plants made it really motivating for me to try and go out, find the different species, figure out how to tell them apart. And so yeah, up here we have Eriogonum, the lupin, and the lomatium. And those three are super diverse in Washington State. And I think lomatium has 40-something species, 50 species in the state. Eriogonum has about 350 species in North America. Super crazy. And they can be pretty difficult to ID. Sometimes you're looking at tiny hairs on the back of a certain part of the leaf, and then that's how you tell two species apart. Talk a little bit about that later. And then also content. So for me, I don't know if anyone knows who this is, but it's like a YouTube channel. This channel, what it helped me do is it helped me see plants in a different light. It helped me, seeing someone appreciate the texture of the wax on a leaf. I didn't know that was something you could appreciate before. But then once you start to look at it, once you start to pay attention to someone celebrating a niche part of a plant, you're like, okay, well, I can kind of see that part's pretty, and you start to learn more, and you start to develop the ability to appreciate those things as well. So for me, this content creator in particular helped me with that plant awareness disparity. Plants kind of fade into the background, not as flashy as birds, but the more you pay attention, the more you see, the more you fall in love.
That's
yeah.
what the more I see, the more I fall in love.
Yeah. So as an aside here, mechanisms of joy to botany, like what makes it joyful? It enriches the immediate world around you, right? It is the background. The more things that you know how to recognize, know how to differentiate, see how they change throughout the season, the more as you walk through nature, all those pieces of context can really add.
It's time it'll go in. Do you want to attach the speaker?
Add a lot of information. It's also a practice of appreciating the mundane. Plants are sort of mundane. They are everywhere. They are ubiquitous in many ways. And so seeking appreciation, seeking to see more in the mundane is a really healthy practice. And it leads to naturalizing that's really fulfilling. And then the last piece here is variations on a theme. What I find exciting as we talked about some of those spark plants is there's so many very similar, but still different ways that these plants exist. 50 species, some of these things are huge, some of them are tiny. They grow in types of soils, types of slopes. There's context in place. All that diversity within a genus is similar to just appreciating diversity of life as a whole. And it really starts to compound on itself. Variations on a theme, I think, is one of the joys that you find ubiquitous across most botanists. Botanists deal with a lot of species. Plants don't tend to run away. Yeah, the joy is in being able to appreciate those variations. And then lastly, I joined some organizations, Washington Day Plant Society, Areogam Society, and being around other botanists and going out and doing botanizing, which is what we call going out in nature, like birding, and looking for stuff, really made this a hobby. And then my last stage has just been a little bit of landscaping, planting natives, learning how to bring that native stuff home. Yeah. So next for me is probably like some different genuses or families or types of plants to get excited about.
Did you do it
Grasses,
here?
some Biotrichum, maybe some citizen science products, some different WMPS stuff. Rare Care is a citizen science project.
Don't you have
We'll
to,
see.
Find the Bluetooth.
So let's go to
where do you find it?
your journey. So I had my own journey with botany,
Settings?
and it's organic. I kind of fell into it. So I'm going to try and give a brief overview of what I've learned from my journey that you might take
This
away.
has all got to do with Zoom.
So
We can do it on the phone.
the
Hmm.
hobby botany
You
level.
have to,
Everybody.
Collecting for herbariums, that's, collecting samples, things like that. I kind of fall right around here, honestly, using keys, kind of being more aggressive and technical in how I identify plants. But, plant is pretty. That's still kind of. I don't think all field guides are equal, but they're all good. The thing to realize here is as you climb up that pyramid of your botany level, certain types of field guides kind of become redundant for you. So this is a pretty common field guide for our area, and it's great. But for the first thing, it's organized by color, which is very helpful if you're a novice. But once you start to learn anything about taxonomy, which is like how plants are related to each other, it becomes much easier to identify plants based off the relatedness rather than their color. Because you have two plants that are closely related, be different colors, so we different spots of the book. So that's one part. The other part of it is that both of these suffer from is there are way too many species to put in one book. I think in the greater Spokane area, in Northeast Washington, we have like 3,000 species of plant. That's just in Northeast Washington. That's not going to fit in the book. So they have to have single species that kind of represent a couple species. And so a lot of these field guides are not comprehensive enough. You're going to find stuff out in nature in our local woods that aren't going to be in this. And so they do, as you get into it, they do kind of have a shortcoming there. This field guide here does have a key in it. We'll go through that, but that's something that helps you identify plants. And it also has other additional information like ethnobotanical uses and things like that. I really love when that's in a book, and some of the more technical books don't have that. This last one is a field guide for grasses of Oregon and Washington, so it's specific to a specific type of plant. This one is exhaustive, and the images there are, they have really good photography for diagnostics. They have very closed up macro images of different parts of the flower. Yes, grasses are flowering plants. And they're very, very tiny flowers. And they have a key in it, and it's really one of the best tools to learn how to identify grasses. It's better than a formal key for the general area. So that's an example of field guide that I think even a professional is going to be using. Those are few and far between. So I definitely accumulate off on my end. Yeah, okay. I've accumulated a couple of field guides that I don't see a lot of use at the moment because I've sort of advanced through botany. These are the core resources. So our botany Bibles, we have, this is the key for our area, a flora. A flora is generally a key, but it's a key that is bound in space. So this one's for Pacific Northwest. There is Flora of North America, FNA, which is the flora for the entirety of North America. There are floras for certain mountain ranges. The scope of floras can vary quite a bit. And essentially what a flora is a comprehensive book of all of the plants you can find in that area. And it's a key guide, which is we can't see it very well here, but we have a slide for keys later down. A branching step-by-step true-false questionnaire of how to identify every single plant in that area. So it'll ask you, hey, are the leaves big or small? And that might be the first question, something simple like that. But then the very last question will be, some of those. Yeah. So that might happen a little bit. The very last question might be those like what hairs are on the other side of the leaf, and it only grows in a certain area. This other one is the glossary. Glossaries, there are so many words for plants. I have the glossary here. This entire book is just like there we go. Like there's a page dedicated to I think we're dead totally. Okay, so there's a page dedicated to like the 30 types of hair that you can find on a leaf. One is curly, but one curls the other direction, and one is slightly more spaced apart. One looks like spider webs. One is sharp. One is not. They in botany they've got a word for everything, and the keys will use those words, and then they'll shorten them. So it becomes really illegible really quickly. Having a glossary is really helpful for that. Latin names are technical. They're not fun for everyone. I will say, as you progress in botany, something like biscuit root lomatium, you just start to call things by their genus name often, and like you kind of run out of memory for common names when they're so different, even for plants that look almost identical or they're really closely related. The nice thing about Latin names is not that they're hoity-toity, but that they bake the structure of relatedness into the name itself. And so it makes it a lot easier to talk about plants. And then there's also subvarieties of plants. So sometimes subvarieties have their own common name when it's the same species. So I would encourage acclimating to common names if you want to dive deeper into botany. These are some online resources. So
I've used online resources, especially before I got a key, but I still do one for pictures. So the best online resource in our area is going to be the Berkerbarium image collection. And Berkerbarium is the herbarium in Seattle. And if we don't know what a herbarium is, it is a collection of pressed and dried plants. And they get those collections from all kinds of botanists, from all from centuries of work, and they store them and they're preserved, and they function as a physical database for where plants have existed, where they've been found, what they look like, and it's super useful. A bunch of herbarians have got together and joined into the consortium where you have all of their data all accessible for all their observations. BONAP, that's something for like plant distribution. All these things can help identify plants because it does get challenging sometimes, and you sometimes need to cross-reference across a couple sources. I will say, you will also find that different sources use different names for the same plant because there are treatments, and it might be considered one species in one place and a different species in another place. And in the course of its lifetime, a single plant may have been considered 20 different species, misidentified or grouped, or it can get a bit of a handful to kind of sort out that history. iNaturalist. So this is a useful tool I talked about a little bit earlier. These are some photos of the web app. The thing I'll say about this, it has an AI tool to help identify stuff. The thing I found the most helpful is that when you post a photo of something on there, there are a lot of professionals, scientists that work on the app as well, and they'll help identify things that you see. As long as you have enough photos from enough angles of something, they'll say, oh, that is this. And it's that community piece that's really helpful. It helps you learn. It helps you kind of catch when you're wrong. It's been really wonderful. There's some good books. Here's 2 recommendations. I have not read either of these, and I haven't read a bunch of them. I do know that they come really highly recommended, and it's another way to kind of get into botany. If you were a reader, these are some pretty fantastic pieces of work from what I hear. Edutainment, again, that's the YouTube channel, but if edutainment is something that you enjoy, entertaining education, there's a lot of research out there on plants and on botany in general. And landscaping, here are some of our local nurseries that actually sell quite a diversity of native plants. They have expertise in native plants from a different lens. It can be very helpful. And we're going to get into plant identification now. Okay. So there's 2 kinds of plant identification. From my mind, there's kind of top-down and bottom-up learning. The first is top-down. Now, this book is kind of the best resource for top-down. It is learning plants from the perspective of, how do you identify them without knowing anything at all? So it'll start off with what's the order or what's the family? Is it a conifer? And then how do you tell the difference between a conifer and something that's not a conifer? And it kind of goes step by step from there. So you're looking at the top of the taxonomy and going down from there. You learn this way, like 4 petals is probably in the mint family. That's like a kind of fact you might use. Those facts are applicable no matter where you're at, because the family of the rules that distinguish the synapomorphies. Synapomorphy is a physical structure that shows relatedness. If you learn those, no matter where you are in the world, you can say, oh, this looks like a mint. What's hard about this is there's a lot to learn. And so it's very hard to get deep enough from a top-down approach where you can actually start applying it at a granular level locally. That's where bottom-up comes in. Bottom-up is all like going out in nature, finding a plant, trying to ID that specific plant, and slowly building your library of what plants you know around you. Mixing both is great. That's what I would recommend. And be a little conscious about, there's a broad world out there with rules of how to kind of identify anything. And professional botanists will be able to do this, some hobby botanists as well. But also, local expertise goes a long way. there's a lot of professional botanists that don't know squat when it comes to a specific space, specific place, and different characteristics that plants may exhibit there. You can have plants that they should follow a certain rule. The book says they should follow a certain rule, but growing in a certain spot, they don't. And local knowledge can mean a lot in that sense. So yeah, get out there, find some plants. Okay, keys. Now this is the bread and butter of a lot of plant identification. First thing you're going to note is that there are two ways that you'll find keys. One goes 1, 2, 3, 3. And then the 2 itself, there's another 2 down here with a little apostrophe, 2 prime. So 2 is split with the internal pieces, 2 2s. This other one, you've got 1 1, then you have 2 2, then 3 3. It's a little confusing, but this one will tell you to go to 2, and this one will tell you to go to 4. And this one will just bake that right into the the layout. So whenever you learn how to use keys, just note that there's 2 structures. It is a lot more fun in a group because it's nice to have someone to look up what the key break is. Key break is a branch. Okay, so like here, perianths parts 5 to 6. Here, perianths parts 4 to 5. You got to look at the plant you have in your hand, decide which perianth count does it have. You don't have to know what a perianth is, but that's what someone else there is for in your group to look it up. And then you are holding the plant and count the parts, right? So it's nice to have in a group, and it's actually quite a fun process if you can get past the intimidation. And the other part of this is for our local plants, we won't have all of the species that are in the key. We'll have maybe like 2 or 3 in our locale. Sometimes those 2 or 3 are hard to tell apart. Looking in a key and figuring out what branch points separate those 2 plants, that's called the key break, that's relevant. Remembering that's very helpful because then next time you'll know what to take a picture of, so that when you get home and look at your picture of a plant and try to ID it, and it turns out you didn't take a photo of that one spot, that's how you tell them apart, you're not in that situation. I've been in that situation a lot. I've gotten burnt, and that's how I've learned that. Yeah, remembering key breaks can be very helpful. Takes a while to get there, though. Okay, when do you identify? Some professionals will carry around this tome with them while they hike, so that they can key out plants. Yeah, they'll key out plants in the field. They'll sit down, squat down, crack this open, and start reading through with each other right in the field. I don't do that. I take photos of all the parts of the plant with my phone. I just get there, click, 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 and then I get out because I kind of want to keep enjoying the hike, see more plants, and then I go home, look through those photos, and try to figure out if I have, with all those parts I've taken photos of, which plant it is. So I ID later after the fact. Some people try to ID there. All are valid. It's all up to you what your personality is. Quick aside for AI identification. Great, very useful. It can be overconfident sometimes, or it can not have in the database some of the rare plants around. Also, the way that you take the photo, what parts of the plant you're showing, how it's framed, how big it is in the frame, all those things feed into how good of a job it does at that identification. So if you do want to use this, I do use this in iNaturalist regularly. Be mindful of having a shot of the plant at the right kind of size, shape where you can see most of it. Okay, so now we're going to move towards what's around us, what's here. Those were all kind of the basics, and let's get more specialized. So this is Washington, right? There's a lot of different textures you see as a satellite, and all those textures means different things for different plants. Plants are place. This is a map of our geology. You don't have to remember this. Plants are very sensitive to types of soil. Some plants will only grow on certain types, some on others. And when you get into botany, and trying to look for certain kinds of plants, using this kind of map can be helpful, though I have not really done that much because it is a lot to internalize. What you will see is that this aligns a lot with, this is a map of the flora types. So here, this whole area is the steppe, and there are different kinds of steppes in here. Like there's big sagebrush fescue, or there's bitterbrush. Three-tip sagebrush is one of the ones that we have a lot around us in Spokane. These kind of maps are really nice because, like I said, plants are a place. Looking at a map of Washington, a map of the flora areas of Washington, it kind of gives you a sense of context of what's around you, where birds might be, because certain birds like certain kinds of plants, and where to go to kind of expand your horizon with plants. Now, what the map I use the most is not this one. It is this map. This is a map of Washington State ecoregions. Ecoregions are kind of a catch-all for the collection of plants, animals, soils, etc., that you see in those colored spots. The floods that we had scoured out a lot of area. These thin lines are the scoured scablands, where the white patches are the Loess Islands. And you have different plants that grow there, different habitats. Turnbull is kind of a little Loess Island in the Channel Scablands area. Those channels, those scoured marks, great wetlands. And then we have the Rockies up here. And then we have the Cascades over there. Two different kinds of mountain ranges, two different kind of flora. And like up here, we have got a bunch of different kinds of bogs and fens. And the northeast corner of Washington has some plants that really just dip their toe in from Canada. They're kind of quite rare in the continental US, and it's kind of fun to explore. Yeah. So what do we see around in the Northwest? What are some iconic native plants of our area that pop to mind for you guys? I have 3 in the slide here, but I'd like some audience feedback. Like, what is an iconic inland Northwest plant? Arrowleaf, yeah, okay. Ponderosa pine, I see. Okay. Buckwheat, yes, yeah, okay, yeah. Oh, what was that? Yes, absolutely, Saskatoon. Sorry. Yes, fescue's huge, 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 huge. Now, what are some bird-plant relationships that you're aware of? Okay, I heard serviceberry. Serviceberry with what bird? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, waxwings love those berries. Any others anyone can think of right off the top of their head? Mahonia. With which, yeah, all those burying bushes. We've got some wood ducks up here. This is a Saskatoon, maybe that. There's a lot to bird plant relationship. I'm going to cover a few examples. I didn't want to spend too much time just laying them out because I think having the botany chops is a bit more inaccessible than some of these facts. A lot of these kinds of facts we can search. But let's start off with some ways that the two hobbies intersect right off the bat. So Audubon has a landscaping list that they provide where if you put in your zip code, they'll generate a list of plants for you. These are plants that will attract birds. The reason I have this slide is to kind of illustrate the complexities of that process. So yes, this is the list that they generate. It's quite a long list of plants you can plant that will attract birds. This is what the website looks like. I dug in a little bit as to how they generated this list. This list was generated by first classifying plants by what sort of produce they have. Seeds, bugs, berries. I think that's just about it. Like there was a very, very simple categorization of plants. And then as to what kinds of birds that those plants attract, they'd feed in based off the family of the bird. So, passerines have a certain kind of diet. And that would see, plants that have seeds, passerines would eat, and that's what would attract them. So even with those simple rules, they were able to generate a really extensive list. But in my outing, birding, botanizing, I've seen a lot of other kinds of relationships that are a bit deeper than just that layer. A different Audubon society, actually, the Kittitas Audubon, someone put together a list for their region. Now, there's a lot of overlap with their region and our region, but it's not quite perfect. Like some of the plants that they have in here don't grow in our area, but there are good analogs. So this is available online, and it's a great place to start if you're looking for plants that you want to incorporate into your garden that's going to attract birds. And it's a bit more specific down to species of our area. And you can see here they have a very similar metric: seeds, berry, larval host. That's a bit more extensive. But yeah, those are two good resources. But yeah, so it does extend beyond, like we said, the food to space and time. So when you have a dependence in an ecosystem, that can shape things. Let's look at an example, the white pine. So this is an endangered species of tree in North America. They've been hit with a pretty brutal disease that's kind of tanking their numbers. There's been some research done on the genetic history of the tree, and they were able to, sampling the genes of different populations, figure out how related different populations are, and when did that relation start? When did the population kind of start? And what they were able to find with genetic data is that the populations grew not in a smooth fashion, but in these bursts where you'd have one population in one place and then it would all of a sudden crop up in another, all of a sudden crop up in another. Those disjunctions in population are dispersal events. And a lot of phylogenetic study of plants these days is concerned with or is interested in these dispersal events. One of the best dispersal event contributors are birds. So the study was able to conclude that the Clark's nutcracker is actually almost primarily responsible for the distribution of the whitebark pine in North America. So the landscape itself, the species, the distribution is fundamentally linked to the relationship of this bird with that plant, the behavior of this bird. There's a lot of context there, and there is an innumerable amount of stories of our landscape, the things that we see out our front door being linked by relationships like this. And, and it's a feedback loop, right? We talked a little bit about how the plant collection shapes what's available for birds. So it's really a tapestry. Another example is the Canada jay, similar bird, but this one's plant dependence, instead of being a distributor like the Clark's nuthatch, it's actually bound pretty strictly to certain types of forest. So the Canada jay, it is bound to specific spruce forest types because they have a behavior where they cache food in the bark over winter. So they need specific bark that can cache food the way that they do, and it has to be in a place that is cold enough. So their range here, you can see, is bound to where you find only these certain kinds of spruce trees, which are high elevation trees that have the right kind of bark. Notably, in the Sierra Nevadas, which is a high elevation mountain range, you don't find them because there's not the right kind of trees there. There are other kinds of trees, but not these. This is an Engelmann spruce. This is one of our native spruces here, and one of the ones that these jays like a lot. We can find them up on Mount Spokane because these trees are up there. Pollination, another way, a pretty direct way that we have plants and birds relating to each other. So the red columbine, beautiful plant. Its primary pollinator are the hummingbirds. We don't have a lot of primary primarily hummingbird pollinator plants here in the inland Northwest. Tons down in the desert. Don't even get me started on that. But here, this is one of ours. It's a beautiful plant. And when you think about, like, we put out our hummingbird feeders. There aren't a lot of these big red flowering tube plants that grow here natively, but we do get quite a few hummingbirds. If you've ever been to Lincoln Park or if you've been walking around the summer, you'll see these cuties zipping around. And they do need food, and they've needed food for eons. So, yeah. Digging into the hummingbird relationships a little bit more, though, plants are also, they offer things to birds based off the context and the community that they're part of. So this is a photo from Lincoln Park, not a great photo, took it through my binoculars with my phone. But these are hummingbirds on the Saskatoon bushes that cover that landscape. And what I've observed there is they love to stand at the top of those little Saskatoons, and it's kind of like their little throne of their little domain that they fight over. The structure of the plant itself is playing this key role of letting them sort of sit up safely, look around. A lot of their behavior, where they're mating, it's all tied to the presence of this bush. Now, another bush might play that role in a different collection or a different community of plants, but here it's playing that role. And when you look at the Saskatoon, you look at it just in a vacuum, there's nothing about the Saskatoon that would say, like, it's a hummingbird plant. It's going to attract hummingbirds to your yard, right? You wouldn't plant it for that reason. But if you're looking at an environment like Lincoln Park, the absence of that plant would be a huge detriment to the hummingbird population. So these sorts of connections can be unintuitive and based on context, like community. Second degree relationships. So plants equals bugs equals birds. A lot of birds, including hummingbirds, eat bugs. And bugs, a lot of bugs, need plants. It's simple stuff, but the idea here is that we just touched on a few examples of relationships that are direct, but there's tons and tons of indirect by not just second degree, but third degree and etc. kinds of relationships. So yeah, this is a buzz pollinating hummingbird. I wanted to mention that because, well, okay, here's a good question. For someone who does not know the answer, how many bee species are in Washington State? Can I have a guess? 50? Not quite that many. But there's, so the last I heard is it's something along the lines of 350 identified species of bee in Washington State. And diversifying the ecological portfolio is the sentiment I really want to drive home here. All of those bee species, some of them are generalists, some of them are not. Some of them are specialists, like that hummingbird, that bumblebee. It was buzz pollinating. That's a specialist type of pollinator relationship. It's not relying on that specific kind of flower, but there are a lot of pollinators reliant on specific plants. So a well-known example here is there are kinds of lupin where they are the host plant for a specific species of moth, where that moth can be hosted by no other plant, not even a very similar lupin species. And so as that lupin species disappears from habitat loss, that butterfly becomes like super endangered. It's a one-to-one. That's the only thing it lives on. It's part of its life cycle. And there's a lot of examples of this in the insect and plant world. This diversity of species in bees, it's a diversity of diet, a diversity of plants. It's a lot more resilient to like climate changes, to other kinds of upheavals, because something that might affect one species won't affect another, et cetera, et cetera. So rare plants play a key role in maintaining the diversity of food sources for our birds, different times of year, things like that. Endemism is a concept in botany of plants that are only found in a very narrow area, location-wise. A lot of it is because of soil type, stuff like that. And endemism drives a lot of these kinds of unique relationships. A good example is serpentine soils. These are kinds of soils that are really harsh to plants. I've been on some, and it's basically barren except for like one or two species you see there. And in these barren areas, these specialist plants provide food sources for insects, which provide food sources for birds. Maintaining diversity is really important. And another piece of that is the invasive plant management. A lot of invasive plants will push out our native species, which pushes out our birds. So that's kind of the scope. That's my talk this evening. I'd like to open up to any questions. There's a lot of things I cut from this. There's a lot of things to cover overall. So hopefully I covered a good selection of things. Yeah, any questions? Yes. I can just repeat your question. Question was, did I start with an interest in birds or did I start with an interest in plants first? I would say that's hard to tell. Arguably birds, because my parents took me out into nature as a kid. And as a kid, animals are a lot more captivating. But as far as the more serious, diving in more seriously to naturalism, I think plants were my first interest. Like obviously I'm part of Audubon Society. I like birds, but I think plants first in a sense. Any other questions? Yeah. Yes. Yeah, that's correct. I think I can actually probably. It's very similar to eBird. Does iNaturalist, is that what I use to track my observations? Was that what I was using to track observations in Lincoln Park? And is that work similarly to eBird? The answer is yes to all of those. So it is a citizen science app that you put in observations for. It is a bit different in that it is photo based. You can also put in audio recordings, kind of similar to Merlin, but the primary user base uses photos, which for birds, challenging, especially with an iPhone, is your only source of photos. My bird photos are often pretty wonky. Either they're in motion or I'm taking one through, I don't know if we can find one, through my binoculars. But yeah, it's a citizen science. All the data is available. Oh, I don't think it's sharing. Oh, not on the screen here. Okay. I had it pulled up and I was just chatting. Zoom can see this, but I don't think you guys can. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll leave it there. Yes. I have not. So the question was, have I used PlantNet? I haven't. There are a lot of these similar citizen science apps. So Bug Guide is another one for people that like bugs. I started off with iNaturalist and have kind of stuck with it. It's just like like your brand of phone you stick with it. I think it does have probably the largest user base. It's very well known and a lot of professional botanists use it. So sometimes you can get quicker turnaround on feedback and stuff like that. Yeah. Okay, so the question was, how does someone just starting off in botany, any advice for them so they don't collect rare plants? I think it depends on where you're at. Getting familiar with what the rare plants are is a good place to start. Spokane County doesn't have a ton of threatened or endangered species. There are a few. This list is small enough where it's something you could probably digest. There are some resources online to find that information. And then, everything that's not on that list is fair game. WMPS has some guidelines on how to collect plants in an ethical way. that's also a good place to start. So the WMPS website will have some guidelines. Yes. Yeah, so the Washington Native Plant Society has a Northeast chapter. When you get the membership for Washington Native Plant Society, you get it on the statewide website, and then you select what chapter you're applying it for. And yeah, we have a chapter here. It's small but mighty. We're trying to get some more momentum for it. But yeah, a lot of the times our events are botanizing events. So there'll be a location where we know where there's a good diversity of plants or some rare plants, do a guided tour or something there like that. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So all are killing the lawn. Spokanescape, I will say, is decent. However, they are sort of, I talked about this a little bit earlier, of local native versus North American native. Spokanescape's list is a bit heavier on the North American native or even non-native plants that are xeric. Some of the plants I actually I'm a little worried that they're on the list because they tend to be a bit aggressive non-native plants. I haven't had a chance to talk to them about it yet. Plants I would recommend, it depends on how dry and how truly xeriscaped you want your habitat to your area to be. No, like there are buckwheats that I love and I'd love to see more of in lawns, but they really need pretty dry habitat, and it's not always cute, throughout the entire year. Some stuff dries out. So you could do something that's a bit more mild irrigation and get stuff that's a bit greener but still native. I really do think dunes are a great addition. They're just such good habitat plants. Choke cherries, a lot of the native flowering and fruiting shrubs, they support massive pollinator populations. Choke cherry, I think they've measured like 250 different species of pollinator visit it. Yeah, elderberry bushes, any of those berry bushes are great. Currants are great too. Yep, currants are great. Yeah, there's a lot. Desert Jewels is a nursery that's just closed recently. They do have their website still up, and that website, a lot of those natives are available for purchase, and there's a good list on there. So I'd recommend still visiting their site, even though they're closed, because there might be some other local spots that pop open, some of the spots I've mentioned. And that website, pretty much anything on there is good to plant. Penstemons, and yeah. Heather, yes. Yes, yeah. Yeah, Heather. I'm in contact with her quite often on that. Yeah. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Plants of the Wild is nice because they're a much larger retailer, and they have their stock online, which is nice. Desert Jewels is nice because it has all the photos and can be a little easier to navigate for just browsing sake. But I second that with that. Plants of the Wild. Yes, Plants of the Wild, Desert Jewels. Floralia is a local one that's still open. They do they're more xeriscape Western North America focused. They don't have as many truly local natives, but still great. So, yeah. Any other questions? Okay, cool. Thank you.
We appreciate it, Elliot. Thank you.